Welcome to Redeeming the Time. I am your host, Jake Wells. This is my dad, my co-host, Keith Wells, and we are on to our 33rd episode. We only have 23 left, right, of this year? Is that, no, that's not good math.
No, 33. This is the midway.
Yeah. Why is my math?
Oh, no, 66 books of the Bible, 52 weeks.
Well, yeah.
You got me thinking, okay, yeah. Yeah, 52 weeks.
50. Why did I think there was 56 weeks?
I don't know.
But there are a bunch of people going to college here coming up. This is the time of year where people are going back to school. Indiana's already back in school with elementary and middle and high school. But college doesn't go until the next few weeks.
Yeah, next few weeks.
So I thought we could tell some college stories.
Oh, boy.
I have one that it was more of like, I can't believe how dumb we were. And
do I know this story?
I think. I don't know. I don't know if I told you. But Fortnite came out, you know.
Explain what Fortnite is.
Fortnite is a video game where the last person, you eliminate people, and the last person standing wins, basically. And
you get dropped onto an island with and it sort of forces you toward the middle.
Yeah,
it's
and
sort of like
loot
Hunger Games.
and all this stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's Hunger Games, but with kid graphics and stuff. And my roommates and I, we were playing this game, and we look at the clock. It's like 1 o'clock. Okay, that's nothing crazy because, you know, it's college. Next time we look at the clock, it is 4:30
a.m.
4:30 a.m. And we have chapel at, I think it was 9:30 or 10 or whatever. So we had the bright idea. Well, it's already 4:30. If you go to bed, you have to wake up in like 4 hours.
What day of the week is this?
This is Wednesday. This is Wednesday. And so we were like, let's just do it. Let's just stay up all night. We'll probably feel better.
Probably feel better.
That was the worst.
And your chapel speaker was probably like monotone.
Yeah, it was. And then we got on a terrible sleep schedule from there because obviously you have to sleep, and then you sleep during the day, and now you're nocturnal. So.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if I've told you that story or not.
No, I didn't hear that story before. You know what my response would have been to you. The funniest one I had was I was in a dorm, Wiley Hall, at Purdue. I was on the first floor, and the floor above me, everybody had like their wing was a team, and you competed against each other for stuff like that. Well, the one above me, they were almost all freshmen, and we had a communal bathroom. So each bathroom, I've told this story to a few folks before, but each bathroom had probably 10 bathroom stalls. And so imagine bathroom stalls, sinks, and then another wall over, and then a row of showers. So they went in there one night, and they took all the dividers out, and they hid them in the shower, one of the shower stalls. So then you walked into the door was still there. So you opened the door, and when you sat down on the commode, you looked down to the left, you looked down to the right, you could see every one of them. Oh, it was hilarious. They didn't get any of their deposit money back, you know, that you had to pay for maintenance fees and stuff like that. But it was hilarious. That was pretty
funny.
good. So that was.
So leave in the comments
if it is suitable
yes.
for a church podcast. There's some crazy stories that you hear and you see, and you're just like, what were you thinking? Yes. So good stuff.
I bet the college didn't enjoy your.
Oh no, that maintenance guy was hacked off. You could imagine. Yeah, they were a fun crew. All right.
So we have the first part of Jeremiah here.
Yeah.
And we have the first 25 chapters of Jeremiah.
Yeah, first 25 of Jeremiah. Let me, if you don't mind, I'll go give a sort of a summary of this book. If you don't understand the time frame of this one, you'll be a little
you gotta know.
Annoyed at first. That's probably not the right word, but you know what I mean. So Jeremiah, first verse, we see who he is. He's the son of a priest. He comes from a priestly city inside the tribe of Benjamin. So that we learn that Anathoth, that's what that is. It's one of the priestly cities. Now the time frame, he's prophesying 80 to 100 years after what we just read in Isaiah. So he's after the fall, 80 years after the fall of Israel, the northern kingdom, after the prophecies of Isaiah. His ministry spans 41 years, verse 2, over 5 kings. Everyone we see from Josiah to his son Jehoahaz, his son, and then Jehoahaz's brother Jehoiakim, Jehoiakim's son Jehoiakim, and then the third brother of Josiah, Zedekiah. So all that stuff we read at the end of 2 Kings, the end of 2 Chronicles, where we start to see the end of the Judah kingdom. That's not the way to say that, but you know what I mean. He's known as the weeping prophet. You'll see he has several laments, 5 different laments, where he remorses the judgment coming. It's going to be befalling Judah. He's different from the aspect that he not only says the prophecies, but unlike Isaiah, he sees them and then lives through those prophecies. He's there the whole time. His name means whom Jehovah appoints. We'll see later on he's told he's not allowed to marry. He's forbidden to marry. Geopolitically, the 80 years since Israel and the Assyrian attack on Jerusalem, during the time of Isaiah, Hezekiah's son Manasseh comes to power. He reigns for 55 years, and all the stuff that Hezekiah had done, he flips it, turns it back around. He removes the word of God. He sets up idol worship in the temple. And this is the time Jeremiah was born. He's born during the kingdom of Manasseh. And the Assyria has fallen apart as an empire. Babylon is on the rise as an empire. Manasseh's son Ammon, he reigns for 2 years, very wicked. And then we get the boy king, Josiah, who comes into power at 8 years old. We remember this. He begins his ministry. Jeremiah begins his ministry during Josiah's reign. And it's at this time, if you remember, they go in the temple, they find the book of the law. Mm-hmm. It's rediscovered. Josiah leads revival through the land. And we're going to see a lot of that revival was outward, but not inward in the hearts of many of the people. They still have a lot of rebellion. Jeremiah will prophesy as Josiah's wicked sons and grandsons bring an end to Judah and take them into captivity. So here's something that's interesting. So he prophesies 40 years before the fall of Jerusalem. We fast forward to the book of Acts. The apostles are prophesying and teaching 40 years before the fall of Jerusalem to Rome. Isn't that interesting?
That is.
So there's some people that prophesy now who would be teaching and preaching in Jerusalem now when the Antichrist will come, that kind of thing. That's who knows. But
yeah.
You can break this into 4 sections, at least that's how I see it. The introduction, chapter 1, national judgment, 2 through 33, so that we'll spend our whole day in that, or our whole week. And then personal, before and after the siege, things he's going through in verses chapter 34 through 39. And then just like the end of, or sort of the middle of Isaiah, there's all this international judgment, what he's going to do to Egypt and the Philistines and Moab and all that in Babylon, 40 through 51, and then there's a conclusion in 52. So as we go through this, we'll spend a little more here on day 1, Monday, but this is not always in chronological order. Mm-hmm. There's some back and forth with this. All right. Very good.
You got to know that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's important. as you go in, because then you're like, oh, okay, this makes a lot more sense now where we're going. All
All
right.
right, so verse 5 is the first one
Yeah.
I have. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. That is very, very cool.
I had a lot on this. Did
Yeah,
you?
and
Did you
before
go
thou
into?
camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. So before he was formed in his mother's belly, he was ordained and
Yeah. So
he
we
was
have.
chosen by God.
So we have here the foreknowledge of God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. Okay. So that means there's a couple things that I think that means. First, it shows that God sees us as a person. We're not just some blob of cells, right?
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so we have that. The second thing, though, this is a question. When does your soul begin? Because he says there, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. So does that mean your soul's like that cartoon soul where there's like this hopper of souls waiting for a body? Some people believe that. There's three theories. There's the theory of pre-existence, where souls previously existed and entered our body at the time of birth. That's one thought. That is not held by most evangelical or Christian faiths. It is held by, I'll get back to that in a minute. This contradicts Romans 5:14 through 19, that all sin and death are the result of Adam's sin. Nowhere do we read of, a depository of souls. That would be in there. The second one, this is held by the Catholic Church, is the creation theory, and this is that God creates a soul immediately at conception. So the soul's not there, but then at conception, a soul is created. The body alone is produced, and that's the thing that propagates generation to generation. So any dominant recessive genes, that's moved along, but the soul is created at the point of conception. The problem there then is that all of God's creation was completed in week 1, and if God continues to create, so he's creating a soul each time, then that means that a soul God would be creating in a condition of sinfulness. God doesn't do that. God is not the author of sin. The Traducian theory, that's an easy one to say. This is the one that's held by most Christian faiths, that the human race was immediately created in Adam with respect to the souls as well as the body, and that both are propagated from him by natural generation. So what's that mean? So the thought then with what God says here is when God spoke of knowing Jeremiah before he was formed, this is speaking of his foreknowledge that Jeremiah would be born. So that's the thought there. More than you probably wanted to know on that. I thought that was an interesting question.
I had never thought about that before.
And then the last of that, you see, he ordains him. Before thou camest forth out of thy womb, I sanctified thee. He had ordained him to a very specific task. I actually found a whole sermon in this. I think I might be preaching soon. Verse 5, he calls. Verse 8, he supports. Verse 9, he equips. And verse 10, he tasks. That's pretty good. That'll preach right there.
That'll preach.
Bits of meat on that.
So in verse 6, you see Jeremiah's response to this, though, and just like most people would do, most people who are called by God, he makes an excuse and he says, "I'm just a child." Now, how old was he? Some people think that he was like junior high age. Some people think that he was like 17 to 20.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know, but either way, he thought that his youth was going to hinder him from being used by God, and that couldn't be further from the truth, obviously.
Yeah.
And then you see God's response, which I thought, don't make this excuse, and here's why.
Yeah.
I am with you.
Yeah, I'm with you. Be not afraid.
Yeah.
For I am with thee to deliver thee.
And then just like, it was a different way than Isaiah, but he touches Jeremiah's mouth like he did with Isaiah with the
anointing of his mouth, yeah.
Yeah, and
He
I
equips
have
him.
put my words in thy mouth.
Yeah, and then in verse 10, he gives them his task.
Mm.
Here's what you're going to do. You're going to root out, pull down, destroy, throw down, build, and plant. So this God's solution, they've gone too far. We're just going to tear it all down, and with the remnant, we're going to rebuild.
Yeah.
Which I think we got that theme by now.
Yeah.
We've seen this.
And we're going to get
We're
more.
going to see a lot more of this.
And then we get into illustrations.
Yeah.
Like you said last week, Jeremiah loves illustrations.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of so the first one is the rod of an almond tree, or the branch of an almond tree. And you see a few times where God asked Jeremiah what he sees. And Jeremiah tells him he sees an almond tree branch. So what is the significance of this almond tree branch?
Well, an almond tree was the first to bloom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, go ahead.
Signifying that God was ready to quickly fulfill his word.
The nearness of the events coming to Judah.
Yeah.
It's coming quick. Then the next, in verse 13, there's this seething or boiling pot, and it's facing north.
Yeah.
That's pretty specific.
Yeah.
But he doesn't use Babylon's name yet. You'll notice he keeps alluding to him, but he never uses it.
A nation from the north.
Yeah, that's going to come much, much later.
And at some point, this pot is going to tip over and bring judgment. And the boiling aspect, because it's about to blow,
Yeah, it's a good visual.
Yeah.
And then 17 through 19, this is more encouragement to him. Gird up thy loins, disregard their faces, defense city, an iron pillar, I am with thee. So God assures him that he would be safe. Now, he still has stuff happen to him. It's not like he's never touched.
Yeah.
In fact, he gets beaten once or twice here. But God tells him that he'll be safe and stay strong, even when you see their faces. I like that part. Disregard their faces. That's a legit thing. I mean, because he's not going against like an angry church member or a disgruntled city council member. He's going against, his statements are against the direction of a nation. I mean, this is playing with the big boys. I mean, so he tells them to stay strong through this. All right.
Do you have any more in one?
No. That's a lot.
That's a lot, but the first chapter is
Yeah. That was
huge.
all set up. It goes quicker from here.
Yeah, so chapter 2, verses 1 through 3 is talking about the good old days. Hey, remember that time when you guys were faithful?
Yeah, so chapters 2 through 17, there's 4 blocks of sermons, and they're not in chronological order. And the first set is chapters 2 through 6. A first set of sermons, we'll see, he uses pictures again here. Wiersbe gives 4 R's for these. I like it. So, rebellion, repentance, righteousness, and retribution. Only the way he can do that. But so this one we see the first part of that, the rebellion, and he uses 10 pictures in chapter 2.
Yep. The thing that stuck out to me, mine is in verses 13 and 14, where it talks about the 2 evils that they have committed. They have forsaken the fountain of living waters, God, and they have hewed them out cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. So they forsook the Lord, or the living water, and they replaced them with dead cisterns that can't hold
muddy
any water.
Verses 1 through 8, before that, this was used in Isaiah as well, this cheating wife type thing. God's covenant with the Jews at Mount Sinai is equated to marriage, and therefore idolatry is equated to adultery and prostitution. That's a pretty consistent theme throughout the Old Testament. So broken cistern, a useless servant in 14 through 19. Why would you go back to slavery? Key verse there is 19. Thine own wickedness shall correct thee, and thy backslidings shall reprove thee. Know therefore and see that it is an evil thing and bitter that thou hast forsaken the Lord thy God, and that my fear is not in thee, saith the Lord God of hosts. He calls him a stubborn animal, unruly vine, unclean body, all these pictures.
Mm-hmm.
An animal in the desert can't find no relief. An unashamed thief caught and then still claims they're innocent. Spoiled child, a prisoner of war. All of that.
Yeah.
Those are the pictures, the 10 pictures.
Verse 30 stuck out to me when he says, "In vain have I smitten your children, and they have received no correction."
Yeah, a spoiled child, yeah.
It's like,
wake up.
yeah.
All right. Chapter 3. Key words here, 11 times the words return and backsliding. He'll use chapters 3 and 4 go together. They show 4 different pictures of this. The first is once again a cheating wife in verses 1 through 10. He asks him basically, didn't you see what happened to Israel? Judah, verse 10, Judah hath not turned unto me with her whole heart, but unfeignedly. Now remember, this is being preached during Josiah. So there was this outward, yes, we're listening to the king, because I guess we'd be in trouble if not. But it says, but their whole heart did not turn feignedly, meaning it was, nothing was happening inside.
Yeah.
And I would say, if we want to compare this to us today, what's an application for us? It would be, we have to have our own faith. I mean, one of my deepest fears as a parent was that being involved in church so much that you and your sister didn't build your own faith, and we tried to put you in situations. I'm not saying we were always successful in that. That's not what I'm trying to say. But you can't have your parents' faith. You can't have your spouse's faith. You gotta create your own. Not create, but you have to have your own with the Lord, and else it's outward, and it's not the heart. It's this, feignedly.
Yeah. Verse 11, it's, "And the Lord said unto him, the backsliding Israel hath justified herself more than treacherous Judah." So that verse stuck out to me.
Yeah.
Saying that Israel had justified herself more than Judah. Because Judah saw what happened with them and still followed it, they are worse than.
Yeah, and they have the temple there too. I mean, they had less. They have less excuse. And then he uses the end of that chapter 21 through 25, sort of uses the picture of a sick patient, the sin and the sickness. God wants to cure more than symptoms. He wants to cure the sickness. So that's chapter 3.
We got Tuesday now. We got chapters 4 through 6.
Okay.
And
4 continues on from chapter 3. So we got 2 more pictures here. The famous picture in verses 1 through 3 is of the fallowed ground. It's not a term we use much anymore, but are you familiar with that term?
Not as well, no.
So just imagine you're in a field and you're plowing it, and there's big old chunks there. I mean, it's
untilled.
Yeah, untilled. It's not very good for planting items. So there's hard spots, there's barriers there. So the whole thought here is, we have hard spots in our heart, barriers that don't allow God to work. So break up the fallowed ground is the term that's used there. That's I heard many a sermon on that, and I'd imagine as Brent's going through the book of Jeremiah on the different pictures, this will probably be one of them that he'll do. Verse 4, this is our introduction to the term uncircumcised heart, showing that the key to following God is not religious activity. This is for, it starts here. Are we truly following the Lord? And then the chapter ends showing the coming judgment and punishment. And we see Jeremiah's first lament.
Yeah. See the anguish.
Yeah.
It gives him his title.
Yeah. His true passion in his message.
My bowels, my bowels.
Which, to me, that's... you can speak, but if it means nothing to you and the people who you're speaking to mean nothing to you, it's useless.
Yeah.
I mean, I shouldn't say that. The Lord's word will not return void. We know that. But we see this true lament. I mean, he loves his people. He loves his Lord. And to see this disconnect, it's just tearing him up inside. But yet this is what God's called him to do. So I say that's the big point there.
Chapter 5. Can you go into the streets, the broad places, and find anybody that is seeking the Lord?
Yeah.
Basically.
So
And
God instructs.
you can't.
This is sort of an action sermon. God instructs Jeremiah to run into the street proclaiming their sin, and then he lists 4 of their sin. So this is the old time, preacher where he's standing up on the soapbox, except he's walking up and down the streets of Jerusalem saying this to them.
Yeah.
Imagine that. We look at people like that sometimes and we're like, is that effective?
Yeah.
And, well, this is what God called him to do. Verses 1 through 6, he's he's telling them about how they're ungodly. He was searching for one righteous person.
Mm-hmm.
Reminds me of Abraham when he comes to Abraham about Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
Will you do it for this many righteous, this many, verses 7 through 9, they're ungrateful. I've got all uns here. 10 through 19, they're unfaithful. 20 through 31, they're unconcerned. They just don't even care.
Yeah.
So
Eyes that see not, ears that hear not. They just don't care.
Yeah. All right.
Chapter 6. Judgment is coming from the north. The enemies of Judah are being sent by the Lord, or allowed by the Lord to come judge them. You see that you'll see that term a few times. You've already seen it twice, but again, it's talking about Babylon, obviously. We know that, but that's the term they use to describe them.
Verse 30 calls them reprobate silver shall men call them, because the Lord hath rejected them. So that's the dross, the sludge. When they purify silver, that junk that's on top, they strip it off, and it is absolutely useless. So
yeah. This was everybody who was dealing foolishly. In 13 through 15, it was from the least to the greatest, the prophets to the priest. Yeah. And, verse 14. They have healed also the hurt of the daughter of the people slightly, saying, peace, peace, when there is no peace. So I heard...
It's okay.
Yeah, saying, these false prophets saying, oh, it's going to be okay. This guy Jeremiah doesn't know what he's talking about. Yeah. And it brings peace for them for a little bit, but in the long term, they are lying to them straight to their face.
Comforting words that aren't true.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to be okay. That's it. Yeah. You struggle with that, like when you're praying with someone that maybe has a disease or something like that, and you pray for healing, but obviously you don't pray. Tell the person you're going to be perfect.
Yeah.
No, you can't make that claim. You don't know the Lord's will.
Yeah.
You pray for God's peace. You pray for God to heal, but you don't know that.
Yeah. In verse 15, it talks about how they were not ashamed in the slightest, how they were comfortable in their sin. They don't even blush when they do evil. Now we're into Wednesday, 7 through 9 on Wednesday.
Okay. Well, 7 through 10 starts a next set of sermons. Now this let me set these up for you. These are believed to have been preached after King Josiah's death. Remember, King Josiah went out against Egypt as they were coming up to fight Babylon. He was killed in battle. Egypt went up and fought Babylon. Jehoahaz, his son, is stripped away from that and taken down into Egypt. So now the third one, Jehoiakim, Jehoahaz's brother, he's now reigning. He's wicked. He brings idol worship back into the temple. So they're worshiping God and they're worshiping idols in the temple at the same time. And so God's being worshipped among idols there. And Jeremiah, in these next 7 through 10, he walks into the temple and he begins to preach this set of sermons. How they're misusing the temple, they're misusing the law, how they're misusing his covenant. and how they're misusing the Lord. So this first chapter 7 is about how they're misusing the temple.
Yeah. This is one of the chapters I got into a little
All
bit
right,
more than the other
go
ones.
for it.
So, Jeremiah starts off by calling out to them to repent, telling them that God will allow them to still dwell in this place, as it says in verse 7. But they don't, and because they have not hearkened to the voice of the Lord, they can look to Shiloh. Okay, where Shiloh was where the Israelites used to meet God. And this is showing that God has destroyed the place that he used to meet them before, displaying that he has already done it once, and now that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, he will do it again. And they can look to Shiloh and see, if you went and saw it, like, did you guys go to Shiloh? It's like ruins, apparently. That's from what I've read. I haven't been there, but it's in ruins. It's still in ruins. It was in ruins when he was saying this. So look at Shiloh. God's not afraid to do this again if you misuse, like you were saying. Then he also says you can look at the other 10 tribes of Ephraim, the northern kingdom of Israel. Look at where they're at now.
Yeah.
They're in ruins or spread across the globe. And so in verse 16, I was listening to a sermon on this. This is one of the saddest verses in the Bible.
Verse 16?
Verse 16. Therefore, so I believe he's talking to Jeremiah. God is talking directly to Jeremiah now. Therefore, pray not for this people, neither lift up cry nor prayer for them, neither make intercession to me, for I will not hear thee.
Yeah, don't even pray for them. I don't want you to pray for them.
Yeah, and if you do, I will not listen. They will go on deaf ears. So what does this mean? Like that makes, if you read that and you're hearing this for the first time, what does that makes God seem like a jerk. But
that's not at all. But that's not it at all. His long suffering has now worn out.
Yeah, there comes a point.
Time for judgment. They had rejected, and we'll use that later when we get to the pottery example.
Yeah,
they have hardened their necks so much that they were unmoldable to him.
Yeah,
and he finally says, "All right, if you pray, it doesn't matter. They've crossed the line.
The only thing left to do is judgment."
Right. Yeah. I have to restart with the remnant that do want to follow me. It's interesting in verses 1 through 15 when they were misusing the temple there and had this idol worship, and they're thinking the building itself. They were convinced, or at least were being told, it's in the temple, it's good.
Yeah.
Whatever we do in the church, it's good.
Yeah.
As long as it's in the church. No. That's not accurate. We need to follow what the Word of God tells us to do. And just because it's in the church doesn't mean it's an accurate thing to do. If it's not following the heart of God, seeking Him, the location and the activity alone won't do it. I mean, that's to me that was the big point there for something that applies to us today.
Yeah,
we have to be careful about that.
You also see in verse 18 how the whole family was involved in worshiping these false gods, and that provoked God to wrath. A God who is slow to anger was provoked, and now this has gotten to a point now God is angry because of their disobedience.
Yeah, their sacrifices aren't any good. Service without obedience type thing, 21 through 26.
Like, it's better for them to just eat the animals at their house than come and sacrifice, because...
Yeah, you're just piling sin upon your head there. And then verse 27, even God's discipline wasn't doing any good. They weren't listening. They were stiff-necked. And it talks about how the Valley of Hinnom will be basically a mass grave.
Yeah, carcasses.
Okay, so that's misusing the temple. Then in chapter 8, we see them misusing the law. Why didn't they turn back to God?
Yeah. Chapter 8, the first few verses with the nation, which we know Babylon will come and dig up the graves. So at this time, the nations, like, once they conquered a nation, it's very shameful on the nation that was conquered if they dig up their grave and do stuff with that. So
It's
But
like it's like burning your flag, spitting on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it says this will be a very humiliating and shameful thing
Yeah.
for the Israelites.
Yeah, in verses 4 through 7, they were irrational. He states even people and animals discern to do right, but you won't do it.
The stork.
They get it and you don't.
Yeah.
They were deceived. So verses 8 through 12 is an interesting thing because we'll see later on this is brought up again. But they owned and they protected the law, but they didn't consume and practice the law of God. So it was like they were building fences around the word, but they weren't using it. They were never using it. So he talks in 13 through 22 about judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And their refusal to return to him would bring judgment. So misusing of the law.
I thought it was also interesting in verse 2 where it says that they'll spread them before the sun, the moon, and the stars, and the host of heaven. That was what made up a lot of false gods back then.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
So
I didn't consider that.
You can serve those now,
Yeah.
I don't know. So chapter 9.
Here we see them misusing the covenant.
Yeah.
So they're the only people ever that God has made a covenant with. And instead of then being in that covenant relationship to be a beacon to the rest of the world to show who God is, which was the purpose for that, they took it as a guarantee of being accepted by God, and they could go do whatever they wanted, which is completely opposite if they actually read the covenant that they made. But that's the mindset here. And John the Baptist, Jesus himself, Paul, they'll all tackle this again in the New Testament. There's this concept constantly being brought up. So there's no excuse for their sin.
Mm-hmm.
The covenant gives you no excuse for that. And verses 1 through 6, 7 through 16, the covenant doesn't excuse you from judgment. The last part of the chapter, power, education, wealth, there's no assurance of spiritual understanding. Some of my summary of that.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else in that?
Just a few verses like the pile of rubble or ruins, making the city desolate, and talking about dragons. The word dragons got me. Made me
Dragon.
Squirrel.
Unicorns and dragons.
Yeah, you don't normally see the word dragons,
Mm-hmm.
but it actually means just jackals. That's what it's translated to. It's not actually a dragon.
Maybe it is.
Maybe it is.
Maybe it's a dinosaur of that time. There's a lot of dragon stories that line right up with dinosaurs. So
Maybe it is.
look it up on answers.com. Answers and
Look it up, fuzzball.
AIG.com.
All right, now we're into Thursday, Jeremiah 10 through 13.
Wow, Thursday already.
We are, yeah.
All right. Here we see the final of these in this misusing the Lord. He's ridiculing their idols. As I was studying this, the thought was, what's an idol? Well, what moves your schedule? What do you have to see? What do you have to be with? What do you have to experience? The Lord or something else? And, they had idols that were physical idols that were doing that.
Yeah.
And at the end of this chapter, he indicts their pastors for how they were teaching it and preaching to them.
Yeah. Then at the end, he puts a request to also judge, not anger, but only judgment of the nations.
Say that again.
So
I didn't understand that.
Verse 23 through 25. Pour out thy fury in 25, that they know thee not, and upon the families. Where does it say this?
I think you're in the wrong chapter. In 10?
10.
O Lord, I know that the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man that walketh to direct his steps. O Lord, correct me with judgment, not in thine anger, but lest thou bring me to nothing. Pour out thy fury upon the heathen that know thee not, and upon the families that call not on thy name. for they have eaten up Jacob and devoured him and consumed him and made him his habitation desolate.
I took that as him asking God to judge the people that have eaten up Jacob.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
He's asking, okay, what about the nations that you're using to take us out? I don't know.
At the end of this, if you go ahead, because like I said, it's not chronological. In chapter 26, it gives more detail what happens when he gets done preaching these. And when he gets done preaching this, it indicates he's seized by the guard. He's condemned to die, but God protects him and saves him. But he's banished from the temple after that because they didn't want to hear what he had to say. So that's the end of that.
Chapter 11, we see the covenant again restated.
Yeah.
And again, we see that the people did not respond in obedience. And again, we see the result of this disobedience.
Yeah, this is the third set of sermons. So this one backs up chronological. So it was with Josiah. We were in the temple with Jehoiakim. Now we're back to the time of King Josiah again, most people believe. And these are ones that he preached in the streets. So he's telling the Jews of their covenant with God. Chapter 11...
in 18...
Wait a minute, hold on a second. I lost my spot. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, so toward the end of this chapter, there's a conspiracy that they had made against, he talks about how they had made a conspiracy against God's covenant and Josiah's reform. So it reads into that. And then starting in verse 18, there's a conspiracy against him.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
From the man of Anathoth, his hometown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as you're reading through this, you'll see how in verses 9 through 17, how they don't like Josiah's reform. So there's this conspiracy against it. And then there's an attempt to kill Jeremiah to silence him. Because the reason why is because they're wanting to follow Egypt. They think Egypt's going to help them. But he's saying, no, follow Babylon, and which he'll get in more detail later. But so their people would put their hope in that, and they're not happy with it. But God's the one that tells them. God informs him about the plot, and then we read his turmoil of dealing with that. How could this happen? Type of situation. Hope that was about as clear as mud. Sorry about that. Hope that made sense to you.
Chapter 12, Jeremiah starts off by asking God why he allows the wicked to be prosperous. And he's just...
It's tied right off of that plot. Yeah. So he's in crisis mode here.
Why are his enemies happy and eating well and all this stuff? But then he switches because through his faith he has seen the destruction of the nations to ruin.
Right. So this same question, wherefore doth the way of the wicked prosper? We read this in Job 12, 21, Psalm 37, 49, 73. They all ask this question.
And then there's another question or another commonality later on.
Yeah. So the what comes down to it then is God could answer. He could have answered Job. He could have answered David. He could have answered now Jeremiah, and then they would know a single fact. They would know information. But instead, God switches it around on him, and what he really wants us to do is to have faith in God and his promises. And holding to God's promises builds our faith. It builds our character. That's different than knowing an answer to a question.
Yeah.
And that's where we really see this. In verses 1 through 16, it's not easy. It doesn't get easier, but this is how we grow. I had a good quote here, not from me. There is no growth without challenge, and there is no challenge without change. I had it written in notes, and I don't know who said it, but it wasn't me. I like that, though. There's no growth without challenge. There's no challenge without change.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm going to guess that's Wearsby. That sounds like him. So he
Brent Long.
So maybe Brent. Sounds like Rick would say that. I could see Rick say that. So, so he deals with this. And am I going to keep going? And he does. He continues to preach. He stays and he decides to fight and not quit. We're going to get hit a lot of times with things, and we have to make a decision. I'm going to keep fighting.
Yeah.
I call it getting punched in the mouth and
Getting knocked down.
You could just remember the first few times when you're serving the Lord and you just
Hit at the knees.
spiritually just get punched in the mouth, and you're just like, oh man, is this worth it?
Yeah.
And then you're like, you wimp, just get up. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it actually, it's a deep wound, and you've got to decide to get up, and he does. And verses 7 through 17, he gives a bunch of pictures of warnings. They have rejected their inheritance type thing.
Yeah. But then he promises at some point he'll come back in compassion for his people, and that every nation that he allowed to touch, he will destroy them or utterly pluck up.
Yes.
Why don't we use that anymore? Utterly pluck up.
All right, you guys with us still? I hope so. We're still in Thursday.
Yep, chapter 13.
This is the famous one, the marred girdle.
Yes, God uses this girdle in this illustration.
What's a girdle, Jacob?
It's like a purse. I don't know.
No. It's the thing that's close to the skin, draws the skin in. I was joking.
I saw sash or waistband. I forgot.
Uh-huh.
That's what Yeah. I read that earlier. Completely forgot.
I'm just razzing because it's a lady's piece of clothing now, but at the time it had a little different connotation to it back then. But it drew you in. All right.
Oh.
Yeah. It was close to the skin.
All right. I didn't know that.
Girdle today would be something that would be,
it's all right.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Everybody knows what a girdle is. We'll leave it at that.
So he has. Do you want to explain it?
Yeah. So there's this visual of the marred girdle that.
How does it get marred though?
You go ahead and tell that part.
So he has this girdle, and he goes to a hole in the rock in the Euphrates, and he puts it into this rock, and then after a few days, the Lord has him come back, and the girdle is marred.
Right.
So here
because
that
it's been
begins.
hitting all the water, the nasty water, all that kind of stuff. And
so just as the girdle is marred and good for nothing, so are the people of Judah.
Yeah.
And he says that he will, and he goes and breaks the pride of Judah and all that.
Just as a girdle is close to the skin, they had been close to God. So that's the thought there. That's why I was joking about that. Now they've been marred and they're of no use. Brent just did a sermon on this a few months ago. Great sermon. He did a really good job on that. Then he uses a bunch of pictures after this. Picture of the marred girdle. Then he's got a staggering drunk, stumbling traveler, the captive flock, a woman in travail, the disgraced prostitute, and blown chaff. So
I like verse 23. An Ethiopian cannot change his skin. A leopard cannot get rid of his spots or change them. And you are just like them because you will not change from you doing evil.
That's good.
That one.
We can't change we can't change our physical appearances, but you could change your spiritual, and you will not.
Yeah, then ye may also do good that are accustomed to do evil. All right, Friday, Jeremiah 14 through 17.
So this starts the fourth set of sermons, and they're sort of interspersed with Jeremiah's prayers, but this is chapters 14 through 17, and that will end the four sets of sermons. God brought a drought. This is part of the covenant, where if you don't listen, these types of things, I'm not going to bless you. These types of things are going to happen. And
then they look to God, right? Then they look to God and they pray to God? Or did I read this wrong?
But it's feigned.
Not. It's just because they're in a drought.
Yeah.
And
it's the Hail Mary when you're
you're doomed, and then you're like, please.
You cry out to God, but there's no real faith there.
And he does not hear them. Their time is up, like we were talking about.
And then we have his lament and prayer in verses 17 through 22. So that's a pretty dramatic prayer that he has there.
Yep.
That's what's going on.
15.
All right.
S-
So this one's the coming captivity.
I gotta get to 15.
And so chapter 15, he cries out to God at the end of chapter 14. He's in this prayer, this lament. Now God answers him at the beginning of 15, and then he replies to God. So that's sort of what's going on here.
This is where the 4 different ways of destruction come in, right? With like the sword and the dogs to drag off, the fowls of the heaven.
I didn't go into that.
15.
I was
just
dealing more with Jeremiah's struggle.
Yeah. I didn't go too much into it, but it is because of Manasseh, the son of Hezekiah.
Mm-hmm.
So it started with him.
That was the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
It's the straw that broke the camel's back type situation.
Because he was the most wicked king.
The thing it's the abomination of desolation where he brings pagan worship into the temple. Yeah. That's what starts it there. But in verses 10 through 21, this is something for us to think about. As you read through that, Jeremiah is struggling. He's struggling between affirming the faithfulness of God and his word. He knows that's true. And seeing people crying out and suffering. And he's struggling with that in his mind. But he continues on. I mean, that's a real struggle he has. God assures him in verse 20 that he's going to be protected. But we see this over and over. You see Moses struggles with this. Elijah, he's up in that cave. He's dealing with that struggle. Jonah, when we get to him, he'll be struggling with. It's this inner turmoil of, can I go on as I see this? God's asking him to trust. What do I do? Do I follow my emotions? Am I tired? Elijah was desperately tired. And the thought is here, we don't follow our emotions, we follow faith. And even when our emotions are saying something else, too many of us are led by our emotions. Every one of us deal with that at some point in our life.
Yeah.
And these guys are at the extreme example of that. That's the spot that stuck out to me in that chapter.
Just imagine being Jeremiah and having to bring those messages to people. I mean,
every day of your life.
No one likes you.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah. But God has specifically, that He has specifically told you this is the message that I want you to bring.
Yeah. It's powerful. Chapter 16.
This is a weird chapter, isn't it?
Yeah.
So he's prohibited. He's told he's not allowed to do 3 different things.
Yep. That he should not get married and not have kids. Are those 2 different?
No, that's the same. Yeah, he's not allowed to marry.
Why? It tells us. But
yeah.
I thought that was because they would just get swept up in destruction, and he doesn't want. It says not to go into the house of mourning, so he doesn't want them to have a connection. Is that
so he's not supposed to marry, he's not supposed to mourn the dead,
okay,
and he's not supposed to attend feasts. So celebrations. So the first one, when he's asked why he's not married, he's to use that to then tell of the judgment that's coming. And then there's going to be, to not mourn the dead, there's going to come this time when they come in and attack and siege, there's going to be so much dead, so much death, you can't mourn. There's just too many to mourn. And then there's going to be too much pain to celebrate. And those are the 3 things he's not supposed to do. Very sobering.
Yeah. Verses 10 through 13 kind of gives us the reason for the punishment, and I think it kind of is summed up in 12. And ye have done worse than your fathers. So.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And you walk everyone after the imagination of his evil heart. So.
These are the roughest podcasts. Constant pain. We will get to good news. At the end of this book, there's good news.
Judgment is coming.
Yeah, we're not in there this week. 17. It's a list of sins. He lists 6 different sins that they've done.
I thought the first verse, though, the sin of Judah is written with a pen of iron and with a point of a diamond. It is graven upon the table of their heart and upon the horn of your altars.
Yeah, it doesn't get more permanent than that, does it?
The hardest substance,
Yeah.
the hardest mineral, right?
Yeah.
And then the iron is a picture of
Yeah.
strong and
Strength,
hard.
yeah.
So
their idolatry in 1 and 5, 5 through 10. They believe they're allies instead of God. 11, they abused and exploited the poor, the widows, the orphans.
yeah,
They forsake the Lord. They reject God's servant, and they profane the Sabbath. That's the chapter. That one's.
you got 2 pretty famous verses though in 9 and 10. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I, the Lord, search the heart. I try the reins, even to give every man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doings. So the word reins, I kind of got into that.
Mm-hmm.
The reins, that means it literally translates to kidneys or the most secret parts. But
I try the reins. Okay.
the reins, but it normally is used in the mind, but it literally translates to like the most secret parts. So, which denotes that God knows the most secret parts of you. I try the most secret parts.
I try the
You
reins.
cannot hide anything. The
I
word
had not-
reins.
I had not heard that before. I just assumed that was how you're controlled, with how a horse has reins and stuff like that. I never even studied that. That's
Yep.
cool.
So that adds a whole nother element to me for
Yeah. Searching
I
the heart
search-
and the mind, basically.
the deepest parts of you.
Your motives and those
Yeah.
types of things.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very cool.
Saturday we have Jeremiah 18 through 22.
This is the coolest chapter of
Yeah.
all the chapters. This and 19 together. Those are just cool chapters.
Very famous illustration here with the potter.
Yeah, 18 through 20 sort of linked together, so that's important to see. They're action sermons. This probably occurs during Jehoiakim's reign. Jeremiah is instructed to go to the potter's house, and he watches how a marred pot, this clay is marred, so it's collapsed and it's reformed. And he sends this message it's to the nation, and it's to individuals as well. So verses 5 through 10, God, it sort of shows there, God doesn't just randomly destroy a nation. His judgment is always in line with his character, his love, wisdom, holiness, those types of things. Those who repent, he withholds his judgment. Those that refuse, judgment's going to be there, and he will restore them after that. Verse 11 through 17, we choose to serve or reject God. And then in verse 18, he hears of a conspiracy against him as well. Again, then said they, "Come, let us devise devices against Jeremiah, for the law shall not perish from the priest, nor counsel from the wise, nor the word from the prophet. Come and let us smite him with the tongue, and let us not give heed to any of his words."
We're not going to listen to anything he says.
Yeah. So there's this conspiracy, and then he cries out again. He hears this, and there's another lament, asking God to deal with his enemies. So anything else in that chapter and then chapter 19, it plays off of this. In verses 1 through 9, even knowing the conspiracy, he invites the elders to the potter's house, and he takes not a one that's still clay. He takes a fired, cured pot, and he takes it to the trash heap where the broken pottery is kept. And he begins to preach in verse 10. And while he's preaching, he smashes the pot in front of them, telling them basically that Judah is no longer moldable and they're irreparable. They've gone too far. Proverbs 2:19. That's a pretty cool illustration.
It is. Doesn't he use the potter and later on in Jeremiah too? That illustration?
I don't know. I don't remember.
We'll see.
We'll see. My reading stopped at 25 this week.
So did I.
Got
So
to go
did
through
mine.
it again. It was a lot of reading. This is a lot of reading this week. Do it each day, else you will regret. I had to
Yeah.
play catch up one day because we went out of town for a meeting. So, and then Jeremiah in verse 14, he goes out and he preaches the same message in the temple, which then we're going to see what happens to him because of that in chapter 20. Anything else you wanted to add there? I keep talking.
Nope. Chapter 20, now Pashur, the son of Immer, the priest, who was also chief governor in the house of the Lord, heard that Jeremiah prophesied these things. Then Pashur smote Jeremiah the prophet and put him in the stocks.
Yeah.
So
So
jail.
No, it's the you remember like the old time pilgrim thing where you put your arms through in your head and then they
Alright.
locked it over top of you. So I don't know if it looked just like that, but it was outward to where people saw you. It was public humiliation.
Okay.
They could do stuff to you, you couldn't do anything about it. So he's outwardly shamed overnight. He's beat a little bit and then put in the stocks overnight. This guy Pashur. Verse 3, the next day he's released, and God gives Jeremiah a curse against this guy. The curse is, I did not look up how to say this, Magor Misabib. It means terror on every side. Good luck, buddy.
Yeah.
And sure enough, what happens? His family gets taken captive to Babylon, and he dies. He dies there. So this is, and verse 4 is the first time Jeremiah mentions Babylon by name. Now it's going to be mentioned 200 times in this book, but that's the first time it's used by name. Every time else it's the land in the north or something in the north or something like that. And after going through this, you would think, he just, in our book, he was courageous. He stood up to him. He put a curse on this Pashur guy, and we think that, but not him. He just got beat, and he doesn't know he doesn't know the end of the story here. And so in verses 7 through 18, this is his last lament that's recorded, and he is just
Straight up complaining.
honest.
Yeah, he is.
His emotions are out there.
And again, you see him talk about his birth. He wishes,
Yeah.
"Cursed be the day where I was born." Where you see that.
You are hating your job. Yeah.
Job, Isaiah does it too, right?
Yeah. No, Isaiah doesn't. It's
Who was the other
Job
one?
does. Job does. Yeah.
There was somebody else.
I
I
don't
guess it was Song of Solomon or Ecclesiastes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ecclesiastes.
Because they're, yeah.
Yeah. In verses 7 through 9, he wanted to stop, but in verse 9 there, he had something he had to say. I mean, it is burning in him. He has to say what God has given him. God has given him the thing. But we see, God lets him pour out his heart. We see him worshiping. We see him wanting revenge. We see him having courage. I mean, he's a pinball. My head does that sometimes. I don't.
Yeah.
If we'll be honest, there's days where we just can't rein it in. That's the word, rein. That I always thought, and we can't pull it together, and our thoughts are everywhere, and but here's the thing was, he was still able to live above his emotions, and we have to remain faithful even during the inner turmoil and put it in God's hands. That's what I see through that.
Yeah, because he could have easily just went nuts with his emotions.
Yeah.
I didn't really think about that while studying, but like he's a weeping prophet.
Mm-hmm.
It's not weeping in the way of uncontrollable emotion. He has those emotions, but they're deeply rooted, and that's not completely controlling him.
He is seeing what is going to happen before it happens, and knows. And when we get to Lamentations, there's a visual in my mind that I'll talk about when we get there. That's just staggering to what he was going through. So, chapter 21.
Zedekiah, the last king of Judah.
We have 4 messages here in 21 through 24, and they're messages to the leaders and the people. Now this moves forward. So now we're past we're past Josiah, Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin. We're to the last king, Zedekiah, the third son of King Josiah. This is around 588 BC. Babylon is encamped around the wall of Jerusalem, and because he refused to pay tribute to Nebuchadnezzar, and he's hoping Egypt's going to come up and help him. So the king sends for Jeremiah at the hand of Zephaniah and Pashur. He's in there again. This has been years now, and Pashur comes, and what he's hoping for, if you remember when we go back to Isaiah, King Hezekiah reaches out to Isaiah. They're surrounded by the Assyrian army of Sennacherib, and they pray to God, and God sends the angel
wipes them out.
And wipes out, how many was that?
180,000.
185,000 of the troops, like that. And he's hoping for that. I mean, that's vivid in the memory of Judah, and he's hoping for that. And
it's not what he gets.
He lets him know, that's not going to happen.
Actually, God is going to fight against you.
Yeah, go ahead. Verses 3 through 7 there.
Yeah, 3 through, and he says God will actually turn back the weapons of war that are in your hands and allow this nation to completely wipe you out.
The complete opposite.
Yeah.
No deliverance is coming for you. I'm going to fight with them against you.
I have like a movie scene in my head of their mouths just dropping like, that's not what we were thinking.
And if we read in Deuteronomy where the covenant is there, that's exactly what God says he's going to do when they don't follow him.
Mm-hmm.
And for the next 30 months, as you read back through what happened in 2 Chronicles, Judah faces famine, pestilence, and eventually the sword. And then verses 8 through 10, Jeremiah goes out to the people after telling the king this. I set before you the way of life and the way of death. If you want hope, surrender to Babylon. That had to feel like treason. Imagine in America, we're in that situation against, I don't know, China or somebody like that. And, this preacher is telling you, if you want to live and you want to be blessed by God, you need to surrender to them and do what they tell you to do. No red-blooded American man is going to do that. I mean, they're just not.
Yeah.
And that's...
What verse was that?
8 through 10.
Gotcha.
It's just...
yeah, that doesn't make sense in our cultural...
Yeah.
And...
Yeah, verse 8 says, I set before thee the way of life, the way of death. Verse 10, for I have set my face against the city for evil and not for good. So it's going back and forth there. So, and then verses 11 through 14, here's the covenant. Here's the covenant I made with David, the house of David, concerning the king. And
God punishes them for the fruits of their doings.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Chapter 22, we see the different judgment of these figures or these kings. So Shalom is Jehoahaz, you got Jehoiakim, and then you have Coniah or Jehoiakim.
Yeah.
So it's
just
the same people.
Same things, yeah. Zedekiah's 1 through 9. They'd been exploiting the people. House of David's going to be burned. Shalom or Jehoahaz. See, the thing there, he had been taken captive by the Egyptians after 3 months.
Yeah.
And they were hoping that maybe Egypt would release him. If they didn't come help, maybe they would release him and he would lead a revolt. And he crushes their hopes and says, no, that's not going to happen. That's what he's talking about in 10 through 12 there. Eliakim or Jehoiakim, in his 11 years, he was more worried about building his palaces. He used Jewish slaves to build his palaces, so they were never supposed to enslave their own people. Verse 9, he's going to be buried like a donkey, and no one's going to mourn your death. Love you, buddy. 24 through 30, we have Coniah or Jeconiah or Jehoiakim, all the same guy. He's taken captive. He's going to die in Babylon with his wicked mother. That also is a curse. He will have no child to replace him. verse 30, that curse, he will be eliminated from the lineage of Christ. That's a staggering curse against him.
Yeah.
So that was the outcomes to the kings. The next one,
We're into Sunday now. Jeremiah 23.
we see the outcome for the priests, but it starts off with all those other kings were the punishment against them in chapter 22. 23 starts with the blessing of the future king. Yes, all these kings have failed you, but God, the Lord our righteousness, the future king in Christ.
Branch with
Messiah.
a capital B.
Yeah. And then the rest of chapter 9 through 40 declares their misconduct of the false preaching of the prophets, priests specifically, and how they mocked God's true message.
Yep.
So it goes with the kings to the priests, and now in chapter 24, he speaks to the people. We're at 597 BC, so we backed up a little bit, and we're with Jehoiakim when he gets
Jehoiakim.
I never say that right. Jehoiakim
Jeconiah.
when he gets taken captive.
That would just be easier if we just call him Jeconiah. Then we can differentiate.
That doesn't stick in my head. This is the picture of the two baskets. You want to go ahead with that? I'm sorry.
2 baskets of figs. So God again shows Jeremiah 2 baskets of figs and then asks him what he sees. And he sees one with good figs and one with bad or evil figs.
Evil figs.
Well, bad or evil. He says evil.
I know.
Yeah.
You ever seen an evil fig?
He says, and the evil, very evil, that cannot be eaten. They are so evil. So, they're evil.
There's something there. I could just see some skit with that. It's little evil figs running around like gremlins. Like gremlins, right? Which your wife despises.
I despise as well. So then God explains how the people who are good are like the good figs represent good people. They will be brought back to Jerusalem.
So those are the ones taken captive.
Yeah.
Right.
But the people who are evil, or the evil figs, will be judged, and they'll be scattered, killed, cursed, all that good stuff.
So those that are still remaining in the town, in the city. Yeah.
So again, another vivid picture, if you can imagine 2 baskets of figs.
Yeah, and he's trying to let the captives know that God's going to take care of you, and he's going to bring you back someday. Or he's going to bring Judah back. Maybe not you, but he's going to bring Judah back. So go.
Yeah.
You're going to be taken care
Babylon,
of. Yeah, surrender to this. And that's just, it's against the nature of a person.
Yep.
That any nationalistic type thought, it's just so
not
contrary.
gonna go to them.
Yeah. But that's the picture, and he uses that illustration. And then in chapter 25, we see now there's 2 sermons or 2 messages here. He calls, the first one is to the people of Judah. And then the second message is to the Gentile nations. So in verses 1 through 14, he's talking to his people. He calls Nebuchadnezzar, did you catch that?
Mm-mm.
He calls him my servant. That's interesting.
In verse 9.
It's sort of like when he called Cyrus that, and in Isaiah, God's using them. And he's using Nebuchadnezzar as his servant, even though he's wicked. He's doing the will of God in this, unbeknownst to himself. This is verses 11 through 14 is the first indication that the captivity is going to last 70 years. This is the first time we see that. This is probably where the promise that Daniel holds to when we get to the book of Daniel. And then it ends with verses 15 through 38. He uses 8 pictures of judgment to the Gentile nations for how they've treated him. A cup of wrath, roaring lion, winepress, a lawsuit, a storm, broken pottery. Yeah, he does use broken pottery again, but for a different reason. Dung, and a slaughtered flock. So that's that chapter. Do you have anything else in that chapter?
Man, just how he was gonna bring judgment to, and not like Jeremiah was asking for this, so he's kind of going over that. He didn't. I don't know. Is he answering Jeremiah directly from that, or do you think it was just part of the plan?
I think
That's a bad way of asking it, but I mean, obviously we know because it's been said before that.
Right. I thought it was a sermon that the Lord had spoken through Jeremiah to say
Okay.
it. That's how I took that.
Okay.
Yeah, because both of those look like messages to the people and to the nations. So we've got another 8 chapters dealing with the national judgment. Then we're going to deal next time with some personal things Jeremiah has, and then sort of like we were in Isaiah, each country is going to get their comeuppance about what's coming up. So, all right, I'm depressed. So take me.
Well,
Give me
there's no
something to
better
smile about.
person to make you smile than a joke from your wife. So
Your mom had a joke.
she sent it to me today.
Really?
And I don't think
your
she
mo-
wants me to say
your
it
mom
because it's
funny?
so bad.
Is your mom funny?
It's such a bad joke. I will not answer that question.
He will never tell Leanne that she's funny. She begs him to. So
There's been one time
So he refuses to say it. That's why I was asking
in
him.
a serious manner. I was be like, you're so funny, but
Never give
never
her the
give her
satisfaction.
the satisfaction.
Fair enough. Tell us this joke.
It's so bad. It's so bad.
You had another one, didn't you?
No,
Yeah, okay, let's hear it.
no. I do have plenty.
Okay.
I've got people tell me jokes and I just write them down. So if you've told me a joke and I haven't said it yet, it's coming at some point. But
Here
this
we go.
one was so bad from my mom and we had to do it. So what is green and not heavy?
What?
Light green.
What?
It's one of those anti-jokes. Like obviously, like
Oh, that is anti-joke. Oh, well.
I'm telling you, it's not good.
Very good.
But
All right, we're in Jeremiah again next week, too, so I hope you stay with it, and we'll get through the book of Jeremiah and into some really, really interesting stuff with Ezekiel in 2 weeks, so stay with us, all right?
that might be the worst joke we've had.
All right, love you guys. Have a good week.